Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 26th of September of 2024. Today we have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about massive bombing and missile strike that took place during the previous day. And the most important updates are coming from the city of Starokonstantinov that is located in Khmelnytsky region in the western part of Ukraine. And according to information we have, today, September 26th of 2024, high-altitude long-range interceptor fighters MiG-31K of the Russian Airspace Forces carried out strikes on the military airfield of the 7th Tactical Aviation Brigade of the Ukraine Armed Forces located in the Khmelnytsky region, firing 3 hypersonic Kinzhals missiles. This facility has become one of the key targets in the context of the existing operational and combat situation, and the choice of Starokonstantinov for deployment of American F-16 fighters is explained by a number of factors, the main of which is the unique reinforced concrete shelters capable of protecting equipment from airstrikes. So 3 Kinzhal hypersonic missiles were launched by the Russians at one point, and this is very interesting because this is the first case. For the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, the Russians used 3 Kinzhal missiles at once in the same point, which confirms that most likely something interesting and something important was located on this airfield during the attack. The sources are saying that as a result of attack, the Russians managed to destroy up to 5 F-16s. Maybe they were destroyed, maybe they were just damaged, but other sources are saying that just 4 of them were destroyed. Anyway, we are waiting for additional updates and real information, real objective control, some videos, maybe some satellite pictures, but if this information is correct, then most likely the Ukrainians suffer significant losses. Furthermore, as we discussed, the Russians currently are bombing the line of combat contact heavily or deep rear. Furthermore, the sources reported that 3 Su-57s in the Azov Sea, the threat of using Ha-69 cruise missiles from the south in the near future. We got this report this morning, so the Russians intensifying the use of Su-57, and this is also very important. Now let's talk about the cities that were bombed by the Russians. During the previous 24 hours, the Russians attacked with FAB the city of Kherson. Very heavy explosions took place in the central part of this small city. Furthermore, we got a few FABs arrived in the central part of Zaporizhzhia, and as for this city, the Russians have been bombing this territory for the previous 5 days, and this is very interesting. Furthermore, during the previous 24 hours and during the previous few days, we got lots of updates about some plans of the armed forces of Russian Federation to begin full-scale offensive operation in the direction of Zaporizhzhia. So maybe the Russians currently are destroying and attacking the Ukraine warehouses, ammo depots, and temporary deployment point. A little bit further in the western direction, in the eastern direction, there is a town of Pokrovsk, not the city of Pokrovsk, but just a small town Pokrovsk, and this territory was also bombed by the Russian FABs, which is also very important. And this town is located on the logistic road between the city of Zaporizhzhia and the city of Pokrovsk. Now let's discuss the situation on the ground, and first we are going to talk about Zaporizhzhia direction. The Russian armed forces, according to different pro-Russian sources, launched a number of attacks in direction of Orehov on the line between the village of Nesterenko and Novoandreevka, and on the line between the villages of Robotina and Novodanilovka. Currently, we don't know for sure whether the Russians managed to improve their positions significantly or just to improve their positions for another few 100 meters. Anyway, sooner or later we're going to receive additional updates and we will change the color of map. Now let's move further. As for the line between Velika Novoselovka and Staromayorska, during the previous 24 hours, the Russians improved their positions and took under control additional tree line. So by this attack, the Russians managed to take under control the entire tree line that goes from the village of Priyutina to the village of Staromayorska. And the current length of this line is around 10 kilometers. This is the perfect positions for the armed force of Russian Federation using the broad frontline attack to move further further the northern direction towards the villages of Novandreevka, Rovnopol, and of course the village of Starozhova, and then further in the northern direction towards the village of Niskuchne, Vremevka, and then Velika Novoselovka. All these updates, all things that are coming from this territory confirm that the Russians are preparing for something huge. Of course, the Russians are not going to launch any attack until they finish the battle for Urozhaine. As for Urozhaine and the territory around, first let's talk from the western flank. The Russians continue bombing and attacking the Ukrainian positions between the village of Novoukrainka and Prichistovka, and this is very important video because nobody still understands the exact line of combat contact exactly in this territory, but during the previous few days we were receiving significant number of geolocations, and they are coming exactly from this position and from this position. So let's increase the numbers of days, let's change the numbers of days from day to day. So as you can see, we haven't received anything from the territory between the village of Berestova and these positions, which confirms that most likely the line of combat contact is going exactly along this line. So the Russians are bombing Ukrainian positions and they're preparing the foothold before further offensive operation from the village of Prichistovka to the village of Novoukrainka. As for the eastern flank, during the previous 24 hours we received significant number of updates from the territory between the village of Katerinovka, Konstantinovka, and Vodyane. According to pro-Russian sources, as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to improve their position significantly and to get as close as possible to the village of Katerinovka from the east. Furthermore, we have additional report that the Russians managed to improve their positions to the south of Katerinovka and to get the farms in the southern part. And we have the first geolocation, first video with the use of FPV drone. In this video we can see how the Russians began clearing operation of the farms to the south of Katerinovka. So most likely within the next 48-72 hours the Russians are going to begin or to make the first attempt to attack in the direction of Katerinovka. Now let's talk about Ugledar itself, and we have few important things that I would like to point your attention. The last updates about additional progress on the ground around Ugledar and in the city of Ugledar we received around 16 hours ago. So something like this. So by the evening of the 26th of September we still haven't received anything that can confirm additional Russian progress or additional control or something like this. The last area that was geolocated under complete Russian control is the most eastern part of Ugledar. Of course, according to different mappers like neutral mappers, like pro-Russian mappers, during the previous 24 hours the Russians managed to improve their positions along the true lines between Ugledar itself and Mykolaisk. Furthermore, the Russians managed to take under control around 40% of the village, but it's just about according to mappers. As for the real geolocations, we still haven't received anything that can confirm additional Russian progress. Obviously, there is a progress on the ground, but it's very important to understand where exactly the Russians are moving, because, for example, if the Russians have the progress in the southern part, it doesn't mean anything. The Russians are moving, they're taking block by block, but the movement in the southern direction means that the Russians are going to have very heavy fightings for every single square kilometer or square centimeter of the citadel. If the Russians are moving in the northern direction and if they have advanced there, that means that Ugledar is about to be encircled and the Ukrainians most likely will surrender. So this is the situation. As for additional reports, we have very interesting situation, very interesting post that was published by neutral military experts that Ukrainian forces have dug in at Ugledar due to difficult situation to leave the settlement to the north. In the meantime, the Russian aviation violently strikes the buildings of the locality. Ugledar is likely to be heavily destroyed after the Russian capture. There are only two possibilities left for Ukrainian troops there: surrender or die. So this is the reality for the Ukrainians, and I'll remind you that according to information we have, according to the New York Times, according to the interview that was made with the soldiers of the 72nd Mechanized Brigade, there are around 2,000 soldiers left in Ugledar. At least this number is correct when talking about 2 days ago reality. As for the day, most likely there are much less soldiers left, but anyway the clashes continues. Anyway, Zelensky finished his meeting with Joe Biden. The United States of America promised additional $8 billion to Ukraine, so most likely the Ukrainians will try to break through the Russian defense, the Russian encirclement, and to evacuate from Ugledar towards the village of Bogoyavlenka this upcoming night. They can't do this during the day, because it's impossible to, because you will discover, you will reveal your own positions. But to break through during upcoming night is the only chance for Ukrainians. The meeting between Zelensky and Biden once again has ended. Ukraine was promised additional military package, very huge one, and now the soldiers of Ugledar, the defenders of Ugledar, made everything they could, and now they need to run away, trying to save their lives. During the daylight, the Ukrainians made few attempts to break through the encirclement, but the Russians, and they were using the armored vehicles and tanks that were hidden in the basements and in different constructions of Vuhledar, but the Russians discovered everything on the fields and destroyed as a result of FPV drone attacks or Lancet strikes. So the upcoming night is going to be decisive and vital. Whether the Russians are able to encircle completely the forces of a 72nd Mechanized Brigade, or the forces of 72nd Mechanized Brigade would be able to break through and to save their personnel and the manpower. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Pokrovsk direction. We have additional changes on the ground. According to information we have, the Russians managed to improve their positions to the west of Vovchansk and to take under control the railway, the positions along the railways completely. And the Russians, as we discussed in the previous video, continue a concentration of forces, and most likely within the next 48-72 hours the Russians are going to attack either in the northern direction or in the southern direction towards the village of Tsukurini, or in the direction of the trenches and dense network of the fortifications that located to the west of Ukrainsk. As for Ukrainsk itself, today, according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, the city was captured completely and secured by the Russians, so this information was confirmed. As for the town of Gornyak, today we got just one picture, and in this picture we can see a lot of fire anomalies. The city, the village, the town was bombed by the Russians, a lot of fire anomalies, and there are very heavy clashes, but without any geolocation that can confirm additional Russian progress. Now let's move to the north in the direction of Pokrovsk. There are very heavy clashes, and the most important updates are coming from the territory between Hrodivka and Krasnoyar. According to information we have, during the previous day the Russians managed to establish complete control over this stronghold, and the Russians are calling this stronghold as Guitar, because the shape of this stronghold reminds guitar for some Russian soldiers. So it's like secret title of this stronghold that the Russians managed to capture. In this video we can see Ukrainian BMP armored vehicle that counterattacked the Russian forces but was destroyed as a result of grenade launcher counterattack. Later we got additional update from the village of Nikoyska. In this video we can see the Ukrainian flamethrower drone that was trying to destroy, to set on fire Russian positions in this building and the building itself, at least according to this author. During this video we will not see Russian soldiers or Russian flags. It's just the author who claims that this building was under Russian control and the Ukrainians were trying to destroy it. Anyway, based on this video and based on the video of destroyed BMP, we have adjusted the map to the west of Hrodivka. We still haven't received anything about the situation in Krasnoyar, Krutoy Yar, and the Terikon of Novogrodovka III. The Ukrainians during the previous 24 hours tried to counterattack and tried to introduce additional forces, reinforcements, and reserves from the Pokrovsk. They were sending wave by wave of armored vehicles to the area of Mykolaiv and Krasnoyar, but the Russians have already established complete FPV drone control over the territory, and just during the previous 24 hours, significant number of armored vehicles, personal carriers, light vehicles were destroyed. So this is already Russian control. Ukrainians can't do anything, and we remember our simple but correct rule. If we see drones, that means that the Russians are moving in this direction. Considering this situation and this configuration of the line, we can say that if the Russians control the road between Pokrovsk and Krasnoyar, that means that in the global scope, the Russians are moving in this direction. So most likely the Russians are planning before autumn comes to take under control the southern part of Mirnograd and to begin a dig in deep process. Now let's move further, and now let's talk about the Pokrovsk direction, because we received a lot of very interesting updates that I would like to discuss with you. Currently, the main clashes and the heaviest clashes are taking place for this dense network of the fortifications. The Ukrainians were trying to counterattack the Russian positions to the west of New York, but the Russians managed to repel every single attack, and currently the clashes are taking place for this stronghold. The Russians are trying to improve their positions and to force Ukrainians to fall back further in the direction of Konstantinovka. The Russians published several videos of how they were FPV droning the Ukrainian vehicles and forces that were moving exactly in this territory. Now let's talk about the Toretsk itself. Very interesting video we got today from pro-Ukrainian sources. As you can see, we have adjusted the map in Russian favor, and let's discuss this video in details. The video was published by the Storm Brigade Lut. This is a former police officers brigade, and in this video we can see several counterattacks by this brigade in this area, and as a result of these counterattacks the Ukrainians managed to restore control at least over this building. But telling the truth, this building wasn't ever colored in Russian favor. It was always under Ukraine control according to every single mapper we have right now. But for some reason the Ukrainians counterattack in this area and raise the flag, and we can see this this episode in the final part of the video. What is important about this video? First of all, this is the Ukrainians that are getting on the building and they're raising the flag. And now let's take a look at the most important moment. Just a second, Ukrainian flag, Ukrainians restore control over the building that most likely used to be under the Russian control, and this is the most important episode of this video. So right in front of your screen you can see the coal mine. The coal mine that is located right in front of this building, and we are talking about this coal mine. This is it, the coal mine of Toretsk Uhelye. And I would like to point your attention on these two high-rise constructions. This is very important because this video was published today on the 26th of September, how Ukrainians counterattack, how the Ukrainians restore control over this building, how the Ukrainians raise the flag, and we can make a conclusion that Ukrainians are very successful in their counterattacking and everything is good. But I would like to remind you that on the 23rd of September we got the video from the coal mine from this area, how the Russians destroyed one of the high-rise constructions. So this is the moment, not the Russians, but according to information we have, it's the Ukrainians who destroyed this building, because we made a conclusion 3 days ago that Ukrainians destroyed this high-rise construction strategical point because the Ukrainians were retreating, were withdrawing their positions, and of course they did everything they could, but not to give the control over this territory to Russians, because they knew if the Russians established control over this construction, the Russians would be able to control everything around Toretsk. So once again, today the Ukrainian sources published the video how they raised flag in this point, but during this video we might see that the construction exists, and now we understand that the video that was published by the Ukrainians today on the 26th of September, most likely old, probably 2-3 weeks old, or maybe 1-2 weeks old, which confirms that the Russians do have significant progress in the Toretsk direction, but nobody, for some reason, neither the Russians nor the Ukrainians, are providing us the real information about the exact situation on the ground. Once again, according to my understanding, according to letters and different posts about Ukrainian losses, and I'll remind you that they currently, according to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation and according to different posts in Ukraine, the heaviest losses the Ukrainians are suffering on the line between Katerinovka, Kleban-Byk and Plechistivka. So summarizing everything, I believe that the Russians have much better positions in Toretsk, and most likely everything that located inside of this red line is already under complete Russian control. The question I have, why neither the Ukrainians nor the Russians are publishing anything about additional progress of the Russians? Maybe the Ukrainians are afraid of this because there is a meeting in New York, and the Russians are not publishing this because they still haven't finished the secure operation, and also due to security reason they don't want to publish updates about significant progress. They're waiting for something probably. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Sivers direction. The Russians continue clashes for the eastern part of Verkhneykamyanska. During the previous 24 hours the Russians attacked the territory of farms in the eastern part with the TOS flamethrower system. The Russians are preparing this foothold before further offensive. As for the Siversk itself, we are returning to the topic of Russia Russian aviation bombardments during the previous 24 hours. And today we got additional number of videos, additional number of strikes from the Russian side. The entire building was reduced to ruins as a result of another Russian attack, and most likely the Russians destroyed the temporary deployment point of the armed forces of Ukraine. Significant number of aviation strikes were received during the previous 24 hours. As for the southern Kupiansk direction, we haven't received anything, just a small advance of the armed forces of Russian Federation to the west in Makeyevka. As for the northern Kupiansk direction, we have the same story. The flower of Peshchana has been blooming during the previous 24 hours, but the Russians attacked the central part of Kupiansk once again with aviation. 4 additional FABs arrived in the central part. The city is has been pummeling by the Russians for the previous few weeks, and the Russians continue doing this. Vovchansk direction, the Ukrainians tried to counterattack. The Russians tried to force them to fall back from the northern part, and the Russians, to slow the Ukrainians down, are bombing this territory with FAB 3000, with FAB 1500. So the desert is the dust, and the ruins is turning into the desert, complete desert. Significant number of explosions, significant number of FABs. As you can see, the northern Vovchansk was reduced completely to ruins. But on the other hand, while the Ukrainians tried to counterattack in Vovchansk, the Russians launched fast lightning, a counter-offensive or offensive operation in the direction of the village by the name of Tikha. So we have some changes on the ground in this area. In this video we can see several Russian vehicles, personal carriers that were heading towards the village of Tikha. And as you can see the video, the attack took place probably during the night period of time or in the evening. So it's very difficult to understand the exact positions or the forces, number of forces that were used by the Russians. Anyway, in this part of the video we can see the landing process and how the Russians captured this small farm. So this territory, this building was captured by the Russians as a result of that attack, and we have adjusted the map in Russian favor. Summarizing everything, we can see that the Russians sacrificed the northern Vovchansk. The Ukrainians entered and moved significant number of forces to the north, trying to clear the ruins and dust. The Russians destroyed the Ukrainian forces with flamethrower systems and FABs, and then the Russians launched a fast lightning attack towards the village of Tikha, and most likely this village will be captured by the Russians during the next day or two. As for the Sudzha direction, for the first time since the beginning of clashes in this area, we haven't received almost anything from this part. Just one geolocation, how the Russians destroyed Ukrainian vehicles during the rotation process. The Ukrainians brought some vehicle to evacuate wounded, but the Russians discovered the positions of armed forces of Ukraine and began bombing and attacking the Ukrainians, and the vehicle was destroyed. As you can see, nothing more, and a few more multiple launch rocket systems were destroyed by the Russians as a result of Iskander strike in the same direction, and that's it. As for the Glushkova area, we haven't received anything as well, just several numbers of significant losses of the armed forces of Ukraine along the lines in this part. And that's it. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.